Hello, people. I am back, and I am talking about the story of Moses when the father was letting Moses know that he had to go into Egypt to Pharaoh to ask him to let his people go. And what you are looking at in the background is Mount Sinai that's in Arabia, in the area that's now today called Jabal el Laws. You will find many people over in that Israel over there, where they call it Jerusalem, which is in the city of Ammon, and not the original location, tell you that, oh no, Sinai is not in Arabia. Sinai is in Egypt. Well, there's nothing in Egypt that identifies the location, but the location was indeed in Abraham's children's land, which was the land of Arabia, of which he had given to them. And I am reading now where I kind of left off when I was talking about the reign of terror. And I spoke about how Moses had went back into the land of Egypt. And when he went into the land of Egypt, there were officers there of his own people, Dothan and Abiram, I believe it was, that accosted him and, and railed insults upon him because they were angry that he had came to talk to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had increased the oppression and increased trouble and suffering upon them. So I will continue because this is a long story, and this is a story that I will shoot probably take me months to get finished with. So here I am, and I am at the section where we are talking about the plagues that were brought through Aaron. Because as we were discussing this particular issue, we found that Moses questioned the Most High over 3 times about him going into Egypt to talk to Pharaoh. And he was questioning, he was very doubtful. And he was like, well, if the people won't listen to Moses, won't listen to Pharaoh, how are they going to listen to me? You know what I'm saying? And the thing about it is, the people was not listening to the Most High. And Pharaoh didn't want to let the people go. And there were many among them that didn't want to leave Egypt. Just like when we get ready to take this Exodus, whenever that is, to go back home, when the Father raises our spirits, you know what I'm saying? And it becomes the time, and the time approaches for us to leave this America, for us to leave all of the places where we were scattered, to go back into the land. There's going to be a lot of us who are not going to want to leave, and many that will die in those areas. So I'm going to continue on in this story. And it says the plagues brought through Aaron. It says from the infliction of the first plague until the passing of the last, after which the Egyptians yielded all that Moshe and Aaron demanded. There elapsed a whole year, for 12 months is the term set by the Most High for the expirations of sins. The deluge lasted 1 year. Job suffered 1 year. Sinners must endure hell tortures for 1 year. And the judgment upon God. Oh, this God. Mhm. This Roman Empire, this last empire that is ruling over us and that has spread itself all over the world as the eagle. This God is the last kingdom to be destroyed. And the people who are in confederate with Gog, we are talking about the descendants of Ishmael, the leaders. I'm talking about the leaders because all the people ain't involved anyway in that, but it is the leaders of the Ishmaelites are involved in this as well. And then we have Gog. We have that Germans, okay? They call them Ashkenazi today. And they also have another name for them, excuse me, if I can't rattle it off at this particular time. But anyway, their end and their kingdom is destroyed very last. Okay? And right now we sit in the seat of this Roman Empire. And we are governed under Roman civil laws in our court system. So anyway, let me move right on. So it says that God, at the end of time, will be executed for the length of 1 year. Now Moshe announced the first plague to Pharaoh one morning when the king was walking by the river's brink. This morning walk enabled him to practice a deception. Okay? He called himself God. As many of you call yourself God, and you are no gods, but you are men. But Pharaoh, he called himself a God, and he pretended that he felt no human needs. To keep up his illusion among the people, he would repair to the edge of the river every morning, and he would ease his nature there while alone and unobserved. For those of you who are a little slow, maybe, easing the nature had to do with he would do his excrement. He would move his bowels. He would urinate at that time, early in the morning, in the time that he was hoping, or probably his territory or his surrounding place may have been so large, maybe people wouldn't have been able to see him anywhere. So anyway, but it was in secret, okay, that he did this to try to make himself appear to be a god, okay, that has no need for those types of things. So at such a time, it was Moshe who appeared before him and called out to him. And he said, is there a God that has human needs? People, ask yourself again, does a God have human needs? Does a God die? Does a God have blood within him that he rots in the grave where maggots eat his body? A God. And you call yourselves a God. But you are men and you should die. So Moses asked him, does a God have human needs? And he said, verily, this is what Pharaoh said, verily, I am no God, replied Pharaoh. I only pretend to be one before the Egyptians, who are such idiots. One should consider them asses rather than human beings. You see, this way of thinking that leaders have about their subjects, that they're simple, they're idiots, they're stupid, but yet in their ignorance, they do indeed follow these men, and they put their trust in them, and they don't put their trust in the Most High, who liveth and abideth forever. Then Moses made known to him that the Most High would turn the water into blood if he refused to let his people go. In the warning, we can discern the difference between the God and man. When a mortal harbors the intentions to do an injury to an enemy, he lies in wait for the moment when he can strike an unexpected blow. But the Creator is outspoken. He warned Pharaoh and the Egyptians in public whenever a plague was about to descend. And each warning was repeated by Moshe for a period of 3 weeks, although the plague itself endured but a single week. As Pharaoh would not lay the warning to heart, the plague announced by Moshe was let loose upon him and his people. The waters were turned into blood. It is well known proverb. It is a well-known proverb. Mhm. Beat the idols, and the priests are in terror. The Most High, he smote the river now, which the Egyptians worshipped as their god, in order to terrify Pharaoh and his people and force them to do the divine will. Look at all the people who are worshiping the rivers, the ocean, the seas, the orishas. They worship the fish as their god. And they fail to worship him who created the fish and the sea and the waters and the air that we breathe and all things that are made. Yet they worship fish and the orishas and the waters and fail to worship their creator. Therefore, the Most High, he smote the river Nile, which the Egyptians worshipped as their god, in order to terrify Pharaoh and his people and force them to do the divine will. I say again. To produce the plague, Aaron took his rod and he stretched it out, his hand over the waters of Egypt. And Moshe had no part in performing the miracle, for the Most High had said to him, the waters that watched over thy safety when thou wast exposed in the Nile shall not suffer harm through thee. Aaron had scarcely executed the divine bidding when all the water of Egypt became blood, even such as was kept in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. The very spittle of an Egyptian, it turned into blood no sooner had he ejected it from his mouth. And blood dripped also from the idols of the Egyptians. The transformation of the waters into blood was intended mainly as a punishment for the oppressors, but it was at the same time a source of profit for the oppressed. It gave the Israelites the opportunity of amassing great wealth. The Egyptians paid them large sums for their water. For if an Egyptian and an Israelite drew water from the same trough, the portion carried off by the Egyptian was bound to be useless. It turned into blood. To be sure, nothing helped the Egyptians in their distress, for though they drank water from the same cup as an Israelite, it became blood in their mouths. The Most High, at the appointed time, looks out for his people. And when he is angry with them, he hears not their cries, their moanings at all. However, this plague did not impress Pharaoh as a punishment inflicted in the name of God, because with the help of the Malachim of destruction, the magicians of Egypt produced the same phenomenon of changing water into blood. Therefore, he hearkened not unto the words of Moshe. The next was the plague of the frogs, and again it was Aaron that performed the wonder. He stretched forth his hand with his rod over the rivers and caused frogs to come up out of the land of Egypt. And Moshe, whose life had been preserved by the water, was kept from poisoning his Savior with the reptile, Pharaoh. At first, only a single frog appeared, but he began to croak, summoning so many companions that the whole land of Egypt swarmed with them. Wherever an Egyptian took up his stand, frogs appeared, and in some mysterious way, they were able to pierce the hardest of the metals and even the marble palaces of the Egyptians. Nobles afforded no protection against them. If a frog came close to them, the walls split asunder immediately. Make way, the frogs would call out to the stones, that I may do the will of my Creator. I know some of y'all don't believe that this can happen. But he that made all things is able and well capable of doing anything that seems to be impossible. And then once the marble showed a rift through which the frogs entered, and then they attacked the Egyptians bodily and mutilated and overwhelmed them in their ardor to fulfill the behest of the Most High. The frogs cast themselves into the red hot flames of the baked ovens and devoured the bread. Yes, they did. They devoured bread. Centuries later, the three holy children, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were ordered by Nebuchadnezzar to pay worship to his idols on penalty of death in the burning furnace. And they said, if the frogs, which were under no obligation to glorify the name of the Most High, nevertheless threw themselves into the fire in order to execute the divine will concerning the punishment of the Egyptians, how much more should we be ready to expose our lives to the fire for the greater glory of his name? And the zealous frogs were not permitted to go unrewarded. While the others were destroyed from Pharaoh and the Egyptians, while the others were destroyed from Pharaoh and the Egyptian houses at the moment appointed as the last of the plague, the Most High saved those in the baked ovens alive, and the fire had no power to do them the least of harm. Now, although the Egyptian magicians also brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt through the help of demons, Pharaoh nevertheless declared himself ready to let the people go to the sacrifice unto the Lord. The difference between this plague and the first was that water turned into blood had not caused him any personal inconvenience. While the swarms of frogs inflicted physical suffering, and he gave the promise to Moshe to let Israel go, the hope of ridding himself of the pain he experienced. And Moshe, in turn, he promised to entreat the Most High for him on the following day. It could not be done at once because the 7 days' term had not yet elapsed. The prayer offered by Moshe in behalf of Pharaoh was granted. All the frogs perished, and their destruction was too swift for them to retire to the water. Consequently, the whole land was filled with the stench from the decaying frogs, for they had been so numerous that every man of the Egyptians gathered together 4 heaps of them. Although the frogs had filled all the marketplaces and stables and dwellings, they retreated before the Hebrews as if they had been able to distinguish between the two nations and had known which of them it was proper to abuse and which to treat with consideration. Besides sparing the Hebrews and the land of Egypt, the frogs kept within the limits of the land, in no wise trenching upon the territory of the neighboring nations. Indeed, they were the means of settling peaceably an old boundary dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia. Whenever they appeared so far extended, the Egyptian domain, all beyond their line, belonged to Ethiopia. Pharaoh was like the wicked that cried to God in their distress, and when their fortunes prosper, slide back into their old envious ways. No sooner had the frogs departed from him, his house, his servants, and his people, then he hardened his heart again and refused to let the Hebrews, the Israelites, go. Israelites. Thereupon the Most High sent the plagues of the lice, the last of those brought upon Egypt. Oh, I'm trying to find my way. So it said, therefore the Most High sent the plagues of the lice, the last of those brought upon Egypt through the mediation of Aaron. Moshe could have no part in it, for said the Most High, the earth that afforded thee protection, when she permitted thee to hide the slain Egyptian, shall not suffer through thine hand. The Egyptian magicians had boasted that they were able to produce the first two plagues. An empty boast it was, for they did not bring them about with their enchantments, but only because Moshe willed them to do it. The Most High put them to shame with the third plague. They tried in vain to imitate it. The demons could not aid them, for their power is limited to the production of things larger than a barley grain, and lice are smaller. The magicians had to admit this is the finger of the Most High. Their failure put an end once for all to their attempt to do as Moshe did. But Pharaoh's heart was hard. And the Most High, he spake to Moshe, saying, this wicked fellow remains hard of heart in spite of the three plagues. The fourth shall be much worse than those which have preceded it. Go to him, therefore, and warn him. It would be well for him to let my people go, that the plague come not upon him. Now, the plague brought through Moshe, and I might not finish this part because I do have some business to attend to. So I may come back and give this part a little later. The fourth plague that was also announced to the king early in the morning by the river's brink. Pharaoh went thither regularly, for he was one of the magi, who need water for their enchantments. Moshe's daily morning visits were beginning to annoy him. And he left the house early in the hope of circumventing his monitor. But the Most High, who knows the thoughts of man, sent Moshe to Pharaoh at the very moment of his going forth. The warning of the plague that was imminent not having had any effect upon Pharaoh, the Most High sent the fourth plague upon Egypt, a mixed horde of wild animals, lions, bears, wolves, and panthers, and so many birds of prey of different kinds that the light of the sun and the moon was darkened as they circled through the air. These beasts came upon the Egyptians as a punishment for desiring to force the seed of Abraham to amalgamate with the other nations. Do you see that? Amalgamate with the other nations. Amalgamate with the other nations. The Most High retaliated by bringing a mixture upon them that cost them their lives. as Pharaoh had been the first of the Egyptians to lay evil plans against the children of Israel. So he was the first upon whom descended punishment. Mhm. Into his house, the mixed hordes of beasts came first of all, and then into the houses of the rest of the Egyptians. Goshen, the land inhabited by the Israelites, was spared entirely, for the Most High put a division between the two people. What I have to say right now, you have the opportunity to get at us, okay? And to deal with us the way that you have been dealing with us. But the day will come when you won't be able to do that, when our time of punishment and our sentence is up. Yes. So again, I shall say that Goshen, the land inhabited by the Israelites, was spared entirely, for the Most High puts a division between the two people. It is true. The Israelites had committed sins enough to deserve punishments, but the Holy One, blessed be He, permitted the Egyptians to act as a ransom for Israel. For a ransom. I want you to understand that. Again, Pharaoh expressed his willingness to let the children of Israel sacrifice unto their gods. But they were to stay in the land and do it, not go outside into the wilderness. And Moshe pointed out to Pharaoh how unbecoming it would be for the Israelites to sacrifice before the very eyes of the people the animals that the Egyptians worshiped as gods. Then Pharaoh consented to let them go beyond the borders of his land, only they were not to go very far away. And Moshe, to mislead him, asked for a 3-day journey into the wilderness. But again, when Moshe had entreated the Most High on Pharaoh's behalf and the hordes of the wild beasts had vanished, the king hardened his heart again and did not let the people go. The cessations of the fourth plague was as miraculous as the plague itself. The very animals that had been slain by the Egyptians in self-defense returned to life and departed from the land with the rest. This was ordained to prevent the wicked oppressors from profiting by the punishment, even too much as the value of the hides and the flesh of the dead animals. It had not been so with the useless frogs. They had died on the spot, and their carcasses had remained where they fell. Now the fifth plague inflicted by the Most High upon the Egyptians was a grievous pestilence, which mowed down the cattle and beasts chiefly, yet it did not spare men altogether. This pestilence was a distinct plague, but it also accompanied all the other plagues, and the death of many Egyptians was due to it. The Israelites again came off unscathed. Indeed, if an Israelite had a just claim upon a beast held by the Egyptian, it too was spared. And the same good fortune waited upon each cattle, as was the common property of the Israelites and the Egyptians. The sixth plague, the plague of boils, was produced by Moshe and Aaron together in a miraculous way. Each took a handful of ashes of the furnace. Then Moshe held the contents of the 2 heaps in the hollow of one of his hands and sprinkled the ashes up toward the heavens. And it flew so high that it reached the divine throne, returning earthward. It scattered over the whole land of Egypt, a space equal to 400 square parasangs. The small dust of the ashes produced leprosy upon the skin of the Egyptians and blains, Lains, of a particular kind, soft within and dry on top. Did you hear what I said? Leprosy. The ash produced leprosy. Leprosy is white skin, okay? Leprosy is white skin. Remember that. Moses' hand was dark skinned. He put it in his bosom, and when he took it out, it was leprous as snow. The real Egyptians were dark-skinned people. The real children of Israel were dark-skinned people. The Ishmaelites were dark-skinned people. Let nobody fool you. Keturah's children were light-skinned people. Keturah's children were dark-skinned people. The Midianites were dark-skinned people. It is time for us to wake up out of the brainwash. Wake up out of the brainwash. Now, the Egyptians were inflicted with leprosy. The first 5 plagues the Egyptians had tried to imitate, and partly they had succeeded. But in the 6th plague, they could not stand before Moshe, and thenceforth they gave up on the attempt to do it as he did. Their craft had all along been harmful to themselves. Although they could produce the plagues, they could not imitate Moshe in causing them to disappear. They would put their hands into their bosoms and draw them out white with leprosy, exactly like Moshe, but their flesh remained leprous until the day of their death. And the same happened with all the other plagues that they imitated. Until their dying day, they were afflicted with the ills they produced. As Pharaoh had wittingly hardened his heart with each of the first 5 plagues and refused to turn from his simple purpose, the Most High punished him thereafter in such wise that he could not mend his ways if he would. The Most High said, even though he should desire to do penance now, I will harden his heart until he pays off the whole of his debts. For your wickedness, for my wickedness, or anybody's wickedness, you have a debt to pay. And that debt must be paid. To our oppressors and to those descendants of the Arab slave trade, the Ethiopic slave trade, okay? And the European slave trade. You have a debt to pay. And it must be paid. You ain't paid your debt. You got to pay that debt. Pharaoh had observed that whenever he walked on the brink of the Nile, Moshe would intercept him. He therefore gave up his morning walks. But the Most High bade Moshe seek the king in his palace in the early hours of the day and urge him to repent of his evil ways. Stop hopping on the couch, children. Therefore, Moshe, let's find it, spake to him as follows. In the name of the Most High, O thou villain, thou thinkest that I cannot destroy thee from the world? Consider if I had desired it. Instead of smiting the cattle, I might have smitten thee and thy people with the pestilence, and thou wouldest have been cut off from the earth. I inflicted the plague only in such degree as was necessary to show thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. But thou doest not leave off treading my people underfoot. Mm. Behold, tomorrow, when the sun passes this point, whereat Moshe made a stroke upon the wall, I will cause a very grievous hail to pour down, such as will be only once more when I annihilate Gog with hail, fire, and brimstone. Did you hear what I just said from this book? Gog, that old Roman Empire, the ones that have us in their house of bondage. The book says, this Gog, this Roman Empire, this last kingdom that is in power right now, that has wedged her power all across the world, okay? The Father shall annihilate them with hail and fire and brimstone. Just sit and wait for it. It shall surely come to pass. But the Most High's loving kindness is so great that even in his wrath, he has mercy upon the wicked, and as his chief object, is his chief object, was not to injure men and beasts, but to damage the vegetation in the fields of the Egyptians. He bade Moshe admonish Pharaoh to send and hasten in his cattle and all that he had in the field. But the warning fell on heedless ears. Job was the only one to take it to heart, while Pharaoh and his people regarded not the word of the Most High. Therefore, the Most High let the hail smite both man and beast instead of confining it to the herbs and the trees of the field, as he had intended from the first. As a rule, fire and water are elements at war with each other. But in the hailstone that smote the land of Egypt, they were reconciled. A fire rested in the hailstone as the burning wick swam in the oil of a lamp. Yes, indeed. The surrounding fluid cannot extinguish the flame. The Egyptians were smitten either by the hail or by the fire. In the one case as the other, their flesh was seared, and the bodies of the many that were slain by the hail were consumed by the fire. The hailstone heaped themselves up like a wall, so that the carcasses of the slain beasts could not be removed. And if the people succeeded in dividing the dead animals and carrying their flesh off, the birds of prey would attack them on their way home and snatch their prize away. But the vegetation in the field suffered even more than man and beast. For the hail came down like an axe upon the trees and broke them. That the wheat and the smelt were not crushed was a miracle. Now at the last, Pharaoh acknowledged and said, the Most High is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. He was righteous when he bade us hasten in our cattle from before the hail, and I and my people were wicked, for we heeded not his warning, and men and beasts were found in the field by the hail and slain. Again, he begged Moshe to supplicate the Most High in his behalf, that he turn the plague away. And he promised to let the children of Israel go. And Moses consented to do his will, saying, however, think not that I do not know what will happen after the plague is stayed. I know that thou and thy servants, you will fear the Most High God once his punishment is removed, as little as you feared him before. But to show his greatness, I will pray to him, to make the hell to cease.
Excuse me,
Continuing
excuse me.
later on.